Paul Brunton's Spiritual Essentials, The Power of Prayer, Affirmations, and Mantras. The Power of Prayer, Affirmations, and Mantras. Quest Series 3, Video 13. Presented by the Paul Brunton Philosophic Foundation. The quest begins with prayer and even ends with it too. No one, whether novice or proficient, can afford to throw away this valuable means of communion, adoration, worship, and request. Prayer is the mood of the lower self when it turns toward the higher self. The first value of prayer is that it is a confession of personal inadequacy and, by consequence, an aspiration to personal upliftment. It is a self-humbling of the ego and the beginning of a detachment from it. It is a first step in obedience to Jesus' paradoxical proclamation, "He that loses his life shall find it." Prayer, which is private and individual, is superior in quality and sincerer in tone than prayer which is public and collective. When you no longer look only to the established tradition offered by others, but also and more deeply into your own inner consciousness, you are then following the way pointed to by Jesus and Buddha and Lao Tzu. For this is how and where the soul reveals itself. The devotional element belongs as much to this quest as to any other. Adoration of the divine soul and humility in the divine presence are two necessary qualities which the quester ought to develop. In prayer, we are trying to speak to God. In meditation, we are trying to let God speak to us. Prayer ought to be a reaching out to the spiritual presence of the higher power. It ought to satisfy itself with obtaining a certain intuitive feeling, above and beyond all its ordinary, everyday personal feelings. Then, if it seeks something specific, it ought to ask for more light of understanding, more power of self-mastery, more goodness of heart, not for more dollars in the bank, more furniture in the home, more horsepower in the car. By constant prayer and aspiration to the higher self, you will get intuitive promptings from time to time. You should catch them when they appear and yield to them. In this way, you will get the necessary guidance from within. Those who sit with humbled, bowed head and folded, clasped, or knee-rested hands, with mind and heart in awed reverence, in sincere, worshipful, and rapt absorption, which is aware of nothing else than the divine presence. They are praying, are meditating, are worshiping, are in heaven already. The loving, adoring recollection of the Overself, the constant return to memory of it amid the world's distractions, the reiteration of this divine thought as a permanent background to all other thinking, is itself a yoga path. Indeed, it is the same as that taught by St. Paul when he wrote, "Pray without ceasing," and "Bring every thought into captivity to Jesus Christ." Affirmations and mantras are handy devices for attracting us to this remembrance and making its achievement easier and sure. As a sister exercise to the ordinary meditations, it will be useful to many students, while it is most valuable for those students who find formal meditation too difficult or too inconvenient. The mantra or affirmation is a statement in words or a symbol in picture which declares some truth of higher being, law, attribute, and help, or reminds one of a moral quality to be practiced, or acts as a useful self-help self-suggestion. The words can be taken from any inspired scripture, writer, or poet, or can be quotations from a philosopher of insight and used as an invocation or affirmation. They should be timely, fitted to the immediate spiritual need of the person. What is newer than a new dawning day? What a chance it offers for the renewing of life, too. And how better to do this than to take a positive, affirmative declaration like, "I am infinite peace," as the first morning thought, and to hold it and hold on to it for those first few minutes which set the day's keynote. Then whatever matters there will be to attend, or pressing, weighty duties to be fulfilled, we shall carry our peace into the midst of them. You use the mantric repetition to work yourself into the state of rapt concentration, and then feel your way into the inner self's presence. Such repetition must not only remind us of the overself, but attract us to it. Hence, it should be one that inspires devotion and uplifts character. It should embody spiritualizing thought and gather ennobling emotion around it. It may consist of a single word name or attribute of God, or of a chosen spiritual guide, but it is preferable and more powerful to use an inspirational phrase of 3 to 10 syllables. This may be an invocation to divinity, or to the guide, or be a beneficent auto-suggestion. The formula must be repeated many times a day, and every day in the year. Yet its words should always carry vivid meaning and never be allowed to become mere parrot utterances. There is no fixed time and no particular posture necessary for the practice. It may be muttered half aloud in the early stages, but should become silent and mental in the later stages. The repeated invocation of a sacred name, with trust in its saving power, eventually keeps away all other thoughts and thus focuses the mind in a kind of constant meditation. In the earlier stages, it is you who labor at this repetition, but in the advanced stages, it is the overself's grace which actuates it, your own part being quite passive, and the mantra becomes fully automatic. At this deep stage, you are not concerned with its translated or verbal meaning, but only with the kind of consciousness it produces. For now, it is not a matter of what you are doing, but of what is being done to you. The continual practice of the mantra leads in time to the awakening of your spiritual forces and to a vital relationship with a current of peace, power, and goodwill flowing endlessly from the invisible center to the visible self. Paul Brunton, 1898 to 1981, a best-selling British author of a dozen books, spent much of his early life researching the original sacred teachings of Western and Eastern spiritual traditions. He traveled the world to discover and communicate with Christian, Kabbalistic, Vedantic, Buddhist, Taoist, indigenous, and Sufi masters. Blending the richness of his own spiritual experience and inquiry with these ancient and contemporary teachings, he developed a philosophy and path of practice that suits life in the 21st century, one that expresses the greatest wisdom and love available to humankind. Regardless of how it is named, we each have a divine soul, an overself or higher self, that is with us here and now, waiting to be realized. Paul Brunton's writings are a source of deep spiritual guidance for all those interested in living a divinely inspired life. Anthony Damiani, 1922 to 1984, was a prominent teacher of Paul Brunton's ideas and founder of the Wisdom's Goldenrod Center for Philosophic Studies. inspired to penetrate into and understand the depths of traditional wisdom. He taught classes on the major philosophies, as well as the teachings of Paul Brunton. His dedicated students compiled the 16 volumes of Paul Brunton's posthumous writings, titled The Notebooks of Paul Brunton, available from www.larsonpublications.com. Material for this video was taken from The Notebooks of Paul Brunton, Volume 4, Meditations, Part 1, Volume 12, The Religious Urge, The Reverential Life, Part 2, and Volume 14, Inspiration and the Overself. Series 3 is open-ended, and new videos will continue to be added. Please subscribe to the Paul Brunton Philosophic Foundation channel